Julian presented it this morning and defended it, and so there was a lot of discussion about it this morning. I thought I would be, this would be an appropriate title for what I was going to talk about, but this morning it actually occurred to me that rather than talking about unfit for the future, I shall be talking about fitness of the past, actually, past perfection. People were better in the early days. So let me begin with a quotation. This is somebody who tried to sum up his career. He said as follows: "I try to persuade each one of you to concern himself less with what he has than with what he is, so as to render himself as excellent and as rational as possible." Now, who said that? Well, actually, it was Socrates, according to Plato's Apology. Now, this is some sort of evidence that right from the beginning of philosophy, enhancement was a main concern. So I will be talking a bit about this, what they were trying to enhance in the ancient days. When human beings try to eke out a good life for themselves, they can employ two contrasting strategies. First, they can aim to control the world around them and make it conform to their desires as much as possible. Secondly, they could have the aim to control their desires and make them conform to the state of the external world, the outside world, not changing the outside world. Both are ways of satisfying desires. The second strategy roughly corresponds to what is traditionally known as autarky, or something, however it's pronounced in Greek, meaning the rule of oneself. The first strategy doesn't have a traditional label. I propose to designate it by a neologism, heterarchy, meaning the rule of something other than oneself. The attitude of autarky was prevalent in ancient philosophy, not only in Europe but also in Asia. In fact, it was so prevalent or dominant, so it was considered the philosophical attitude. In Asia, we find this attitude, for instance, in the central Buddhist doctrine that life is essentially suffering, the cause of which is unsatisfied and unsatisfiable desires, and consequently this suffering can only be alleviated by ceasing to have desires. Ceasing to have desires would be a way of affecting your own mindset, your own attitudes. Autarky, in other words. We also find it in the Taoist core notion of wu wei, or however it's pronounced, the way of non-action or non-interference, of having a will that's in harmony with the surrounding world and avoiding interfering with the outside world or external world. I shall, however, be focusing on ancient Greek and Roman philosophy. In his Encyclopedion, or manual or handbook, as it's usually translated, the Stoic Epictetus starts out by making a rather startling claim. He says, "Of things, some are in our power, others are not. In our power are opinion, movement toward a thing, desire, aversion. Not in our power are the body, property, reputation, offices." Now, Epictetus seems to be suggesting here that a division according to which we have more or less complete control of our minds, attitudes, and no control whatsoever of our bodies and what's external to our bodies. He then sort of exhorts us to be concerned only with what is within our control, that is our minds and attitudes, and not at all by what's external to them. He says, for instance, this: take away then aversion from all things which are not in our power, and transfer it to things contrary to the nature of what's in our power. Now, Epictetus' contrast is clearly overblown, exaggerated. For instance, it's by no means clear that we have any greater control over our minds than over our bodies. And in neither case is the control complete. It's far from complete in both cases, as a matter of fact. Still, I think there's more than a grain of truth in Epictetus' view. In his days, people were, to a much greater extent, exposed to various kinds of adversities, both natural adversities, like epidemics, famines, extreme weather, and civil or political adversities, like wars, the caprice of tyrants, which they could do little to protect themselves against and prevent. The autarkic response to this was to try to blunt one's vulnerability to these sort of adversaries by various mental exercises. Of those sort of adversaries they were concerned with, they were especially concerned with the issue of facing death, because this is something we all must do, and it's sort of a pretty serious matter. Remember, for instance, Socrates' view that philosophy is all about learning to die, another startling view. Calmly accepting death, even when it was unjustly imposed on you, was hailed as a principal virtue. Consider, for instance, the Stoic philosopher Julius Carnus, about whom we know virtually nothing except the courageous way he confronted the death sentence Caligula imposed on him. When Caligula sentenced him to death, he just said, "Thank you, my lord." And then when the centurions came to pick him up for his execution, he was playing some board game. And he simply told them, "You're my witness that I'm one piece ahead." And then he walked off to his execution, and he said he would take care to see if we can observe when the soul leaves the body or something. And Seneca says, approvingly, nobody's done philosophy any longer. But it would be a misunderstanding to think that the autarkic attitude can only be applied to momentous issues like death. With respect to a lot of things we engage in, we can distinguish between aspects of them which are more in our control than other things. Consider, for instance, the way we pursue our academic work. If we spend more time cultivating our own minds by reading and thinking, we are concentrating on a goal which is to a greater extent within our control than if we spend more time networking in order to get recognition. Getting recognition is dependent on others in a way that cultivating or enlarging your mind isn't. So the autarkist, the person who's practicing the autarky, would concentrate on enlarging his or her mind. Now, the attitude of autarky has more or less disappeared from the scene, the philosophical scene, as well as the scene of the rest of society. Heterarchy is the dominant attitude today. One explanation of this shift is probably that the phenomenal progress of science has boosted our heterarchy control over nature. We are now, thanks to science, much less exposed to epidemics, famines, and other natural catastrophes. And also, and the political order in many parts of the world has improved and made wars, wanton execution and violent crimes less frequent. That's actually something, part of what Peter Singer was alluding to this morning when he talked about Steven Pinker's book, I think. Nonetheless, the autarky hasn't been rendered obsolete. We still remain frighteningly fragile. At every moment of our life, we risk losing more than we can hope to gain. In fact, we risk losing everything, since we can die at any point of time. It's so easy to kill or seriously harm us that it's practically impossible for us to protect ourselves against all such threats. But still, life might seem safe enough for the autarky to have receded into the background. But I think there is a reason to revive this attitude of autarky today. The extraordinary success of science has produced something of a backlash. The explosion of the human population and its growing consumption are leading to a depletion of natural resources like water and oil, a destruction of habitats crucial for biodiversity, the emission of greenhouse gases from fossil fuels, which have empowered the technology that underlies human affluence, risk causing a devastating global climate change. There is, in short, a downside to our extensive exploitation of nature, which is getting increasingly ominous. Now, science has also increasingly put in our hands means of affecting our own nature, enhancing various properties of ourselves. So let me distinguish between two forms of enhancement, and now I'm getting to the point. There is heterarchic enhancement, which is enhancement of parts of ourselves which are external to our minds. A prime example is, I think, life extension, as proposed, for instance, by the Rasputin of longevity, Aubrey de Grey. People desire to live longer and healthier lives, so heterarchy prescribes supplying it. It's easy to say that this could be a dangerous course. If people live longer, they will consume more and the overexploitation of the earth will accelerate. Also, the difference in well-being between the affluent and the poor of the earth is likely to increase. Runaway heterarchic enhancement risks turning people benefiting from it into something like the mythical figure of Gargantua, immortalized by Rabelais. And now we come to the point of my having a PowerPoint presentation, namely this representation, not by Rabelais, but by Daumier, of Gargantua. I hope you can sort of see what is this giant man sort of feeding from peasants or ordinary cities or whatever, they're sort of carrying things right into his mouth. So, I suggest that rather than striving to boost the goodness of our lives by such heterarchic enhancement, we should do so by the other form of enhancement, autarkic enhancement. Enhancement of our mental capacity to derive enjoyment and pleasure from things we already possess. Spiritual or mental exercises recommended by the Stoics, for instance, were designed to supply an antidote to what is nowadays called hedonic adaptation, which means that you sort of get bored with things that initially brought you pleasure when you get used to them and so on. What the Stoics recommended was that you regularly make vivid to yourself how vulnerable you are, that you can lose everything you possess, even your life, at any moment. And so this is a way of not sort of perking yourself up and sort of realizing the value of the things you have. And it's also a way of bringing to focus what is important in your life, if you think this might be my last day and so on. Now, so new biological means could provide an assistance in this matter, help us in this sort of autarkic enhancement. Julius Carnus ended up one piece ahead of most of us. Perhaps that was because he started out ahead of most of us due to advantageous genetic dispositions. Biomedical means could give the rest of us an equally good start. But we should also keep in mind what I said a while ago, that those things in life people value most, according to many questionnaires, such things as love and friendship, are not resource consuming. So the point is that we should try to sort of educate ourselves or enhance ourselves so we can lead more satisfying lives without sort of increasing our consumption. Traditionally, autocare was equated with self-sufficiency. But that's an impossible ideal. Only an almighty God could be self-sufficient. But a traditional, the accompanying ideal of frugality or still stands, that less could be made more. And that's why the reason for my second picture. You can't talk about autocare without mentioning Diogenes from Sinope, who I let represent the opposing attitude of living a life on sort of meager resources. Now, what I've been talking about when I'm talking about autarkic enhancement is an ethical or moral ideal in the ancient sense, in which ethics incorporated the question of how to lead a good life, a life of eudaimonia. In modern terms, it's rather what's often called a prudential ideal. I don't think that's a very good term, but there isn't any better term. But prudential ideal should be compatible with moral demands, such as the demand to leave enough resources for other beings in the present as well as in the future to live equally good life. Autarkic enhancement fits such demands better than heterarchic enhancement. So that's why I'm saying now that when, for instance, biological means are putting greater, increasing our power to enhance ourselves, we should reflect on what properties of ourselves we should enhance in the first instance. Thank you.
Very good. We have 21.5 minutes for questions.
Well, Voyen said to me you should speak for about 20 minutes, so that's what I've been doing.
Very good.
Julian said after me that your total is 40 minutes, so again you spend
Yes.
39 minutes.
I can't improvise.
Or not to talk at all and just listen to questions.
So do we have any questions? James.
So I'm attracted to your talk because it also relates to the concept of virtue that I'll be talking about later, the notion that we might have additional virtues or hark back to an older tradition of virtue discussions in the concept of moral enhancement. But I've always been attracted to Niebuhr's formulation of this problem.
Who's?
Reinhold Niebuhr.
All right.
So in his Serenity Prayer, he says, "Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." So that's a slightly different formulation than what you proposed, which is that we should emphasize more changing ourselves to serenely accept the world and our own condition, as opposed to having the wisdom or the courage to change other things about the world. So I wonder, you know, obviously you don't think we should accept everything about the world. There are lots of oppressive conditions that we should strive to change. So how can we find the phronesis or the wisdom to know which things to change and which not?
I mean, as I said, I was talking about autarky and heterarchy as sort of prudential ideals. And I'm assuming that we are facing moral demands as well. Moral demands that could actually mean changing things that are external to our minds. But I was suggesting that we should strive to have sort of prudential ideals, ideals affecting our own lives, which sits better with moral ideals than sort of certain forms of enhancements. Like, for instance, I took the example of life extension. So I wasn't excluding moral ideals or moral demands. I was just sort of talking about prudential matters in this, what we should sort of concentrate from a prudential point of view here. So, yeah.
Sorry.
No. I was just going to repeat myself.
So the line of questions we have so far is Rob Sparrow, then the lady here, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, and then Tom Douglas, and anyone else if you want to join the line. Owen, and then the lady in front. Yep. So, Rob?
It's kind of curious to hear someone mobilise Stoic ideas in an argument for enhancement, because so far in the debate they're usually used by a conservative argument. What's wrong with enhancement is it will induce this endless desire for more, and in some sense that's self-defeating. So, I mean, it's interesting to hear you sort of give an argument that's traditionally hostile to enhancement.
I'm not interested in statistics, so my view is sort of unusual.
Okay, but I guess I do worry that there's a sort of practical contradiction involved in the claim that in order to have more control over my own circumstances, I need some drugs, or I need access to medical technology. It seems to me the truth that relying on biomedical technologies to achieve a certain sort of calm or spiritual well-being is precisely the sort of reliance on external circumstances that the Stoics were opposed to.
It could be. I mean, I wasn't sort of in this talk recommended biomedical means specifically. I was rather saying that when we have the traditional means, perhaps we can develop those further. But now there are new possibilities open up, which we should explore, I think. But you may be right that if we try out those means, we find they will be in conflict with the autarkic ideal of independence, because we would be dependent on some drugs or something.
I guess we can see that now, that if someone says, what should I do to become happier in myself or happier with the lack of control I have over my life, you need pill X.
Yeah, but I mean, it's as I said, we can't ever be self-sufficient. We will be dependent on something, one thing or another. And it may be some sort of drugs or whatever could sort of increase your overall independence.
Okay, I think you were next. Okay, I'll put you in the line. So I think the next one was Tom Douglas. All right, Sarah, you're after that.
I was asking the same question. Yeah, so I guess I was thinking this sense of autarky. I mean, so the mind, that's very close to the self and one's sense of identity. Yeah, I mean, much more so than external factors. And I guess when we're reflecting on that, it makes you wonder whether we should really prefer these autarkic enhancements. So I can imagine we're doing this from a prudential perspective. So we can imagine some benefit you can get, some prudential benefit. And you can get it, let's say, either through autarkic or heterarchic means or enhancements, right? Which would we prefer as the means? And I guess you point out there's some advantages to the autarkic.
I mean, that would be, for instance, a certain level of satisfaction,
yeah, sure,
or something.
Some level of satisfaction. And two different methods. You're trying to decide which one will lead to this. Let's assume that they're equally likely to lead to this level of satisfaction. It strikes me that there's some significant reason to prefer the heterarchic enhancement, because the autarkic enhancement is going to muck around with your identity and your sense of self. It's going to bring you further away from who you were, and presumably you have certain values and
so what? I don't think identity matters. I think it matters to become a better person. If you become a better person by becoming less sort of less what you're like in the past. I mean, so what?
Well, the idea is we're fixing like the two examples becoming equally better with either strategy. So assuming you can use the external means or the internal means to become a better person. And it's just a question about, so given that you're going to become a better person either way, what is the better way to go about it? And I understand you might think that, maybe theoretically it's more likely to get this improvement through autarky. But in the case where you get the same level of improvement from both, maybe you don't find any value at all to who you are and maintaining, certain.
To some extent, I don't see what you're talking about. You're talking about becoming a better person.
Yeah.
You're talking about changing your state of mind, your mental your attitudes, your mindset, or whatever. But that would be, per definition, an autarkic goal, so to speak.
Well,
rather than sort of the heterarchic would be to sort of change things so they fit your state of mind.
So I guess you're saying that it's impossible to get the same benefits out of these two.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you can get the same benefit, but you don't change the sort of person you are. You get the amount of satisfaction might be the same irrespective of whether you change your desires to fit the world or change the world to fit your desires.
Yeah.
It could, in theory, they could be.
Sure. And so I'm assuming that kind of the thing I'm trying to get is this benefit. So you're saying that there's something good about changing yourself, about making about altering your desires.
No. It's not. It's not good in itself to change yourself. So, the point is that by changing yourself, by changing your attitudes and so on, you can derive more satisfaction from the same resources. So it's sort of, so to speak, more economic. And that's pretty important. And also, you might be sort of attracted to a certain form of independence. I mean, I confess, and I mean, people were pretty autobiographical this morning, so I mean, I could be a bit autobiographical as well. So I'm attracted to independence.
But doesn't it just collapse into a kind of solipsism where the ultimate is being happy with yourself rather than dependent on other people around you for your happiness?
Well, as I said, I don't think that is a possible or desirable. I mean, for instance, somebody like Diogenes, he was certainly striving towards that sort of independence of social relationships and so on, but I don't think you have to go down that particular path.
You were next.
As first, I welcome the idea of hierarchy as part of human enhancement debate, and the similar approach can be found in Berdiaev's Russian Christian philosopher.
Yes, I know him not much, but
okay, he's foreseeing of new Middle Ages as a return to spirituality and individual approach. It's similar to this, but this is not my question, of course. What was I interested in was this approach to human nature, that you assumed by this heterarchy and out.
Yes, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Okay, yes,
Heterarchy, I would say, but I'm not.
It could be autarky. I'm not sure the other one. Heterarchy.
I mean, heter means something else. Or so,
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I understood correctly, it would be a dualistic approach to human nature. So my question would be:
it would be what sort of?
dualistic approach to human nature. On one side you have mind, and on the other side you have some kind of outer enhancement, for example.
Yes. Otherwise, I would be a solipsist, like Julian said.
But if we, for example, take another kind of approach to human nature, which we can find in understanding of man as a defective being, in Anaxagora, Herder, Dergel, and even Thomas Aquinas and Kant, which means that man's defectiveness towards animal, defectiveness in lack of instincts, is connected with his development of cultural world and his mind and intellectual capacities. How would you compare this kind of understanding of human nature, in which mind and body are connected, with this dualistic approach, in which one doesn't necessarily mean enhancing the other? Do you understand?
I'm not sure, but I mean, for instance, the Stoics, they suddenly thought that by nature we're sort of pretty imperfect. That's why we need the training they were offering.
Compared to animals,
yes, compared to animals, we were superior because we had in ourselves this logos or possibility. But I don't see how dualism enters into it. The only assumption I'm making is a sort of non-solipsistic assumption, namely that apart from my mind, and there's an external world, and we also constituted that we have desires with respect to the external world. And so what I was saying, there are sort of two ways of producing an equilibrium or satisfaction of those desires, either sort of changing the external world or changing the desires. So in both pictures there would be sort of an assumption that our minds and something else, which is the object of desire. So,
Michael.
Sure. Question of clarification. I hear from your talk a representation of certain moral ideal like Diogenes, and I can hear the argument for diversity in moral styles, but where exactly the enhancement comes, which is in? I mean, there is a way of self-development, you just take the enhancement reductively as an ideal of virtuous life, and there are different ideals, and this is one.
I mean,
or there is an enhancement component that I might be missing here. That is different.
well, I mean, if you sort of become better at deriving satisfaction from the things you have, whatever it is, I mean, that's a form of enhancement or improvement and so on. And life extension, leading a longer and healthier life, that would be another form of enhancement. So I don't see why you can't say there's any enhancement involved here.
No, just terminology. I mean, you would say that any fulfillment of a moral ideal would be an enhancement.
No,
terminology.
No, I mean, I wasn't talking. I mean, life extension isn't the fulfillment of a moral ideal. It's something we desire. We desire to live longer and healthier life. If there's improvement in that respect, that's a form of enhancing ourselves. If we enhance our capacity to live longer and healthier lives.
Tom?
Yeah, so I just wanted to see what you thought about a case. So, because it seemed to me that I was quite persuaded that often the best solutions to certain problems prudentially would be kind of autarkic solutions. But so with often the worst solutions would also be autarkic. So
You might be right.
on that. So suppose I've got a problem, which is that everyone is racist against New Zealanders, and this is like causing lots of problems for me. And one solution is to try to stop people being racist. So that's a heterarchic solution. Another solution is to kind of stop caring what other people think, or something like that. And a third solution is to accept all the racist beliefs of other people and come to accept that New Zealanders are inferior, and that might also kind of make me happier. And it seems like maybe stopping caring about what other people think is the best solution, but accepting kind of views of others, racist views of others, is the worst solution.
From a moral point of view.
Well, even from a prudential point of view, you could argue that. I wanted to know whether you think that even that accepting the racist views of others is the kind of autarkic solution that we would have prudential reasons to accept.
I mean, it may be. There might be something bad about sort of learning to accept racist ideas even from a prudential point of view, because I mean, if you stop caring about it, you won't do anything about it, and you do have a sort of moral obligation to. So extrinsically, you can have reasons to sort of keep up this. I think this is a bit like this is a certain attitude to anger, which the Stoics and many people who practice martial arts have. I mean, you should feign the attitude of anger, but you shouldn't actually be angry. You should just sort of. I mean, sometimes you need to put on the show of anger, because that's a language people understand. They won't understand anything else. But you shouldn't really feel anger. That's sort of.
So the solution here would be to accept the racist views of others, but.
Well, not accept it in the sense that you think they are right, but not be upset, but fight against them also.
Yep.
I'm just wondering from your talk, what's your idea of kind of well-being or good life or something? Because you're saying satisfaction, you can get it by either adapting your desires to the world or the other way around. But the way you're talking about it now makes it seem like the experience machine would probably be the ultimate enhancement, because you would just have to turn it on, you would be happy, you would be satisfied. Would that also count as enhancement for you, or do you have another idea of what it means to be satisfied and well-being?
Actually, I do think that, I'm not a atheist, but I do think that something like pleasure, enjoyment, or happiness, and so on, part of well-being. But I'm also inclined to think that there's something perhaps one should call it autonomy. You can have certain goals or ideas, striving for certain things. You can strive, for instance, for independence, just because it's something I mentioned. Now, that isn't just because independence will give you well-being or enjoyment and so on. I think that's something independent, and I think you can it's even rational to choose a way of life which isn't maximally fulfilling. It doesn't create maximal well-being. You could, like the artist, his name is Van Gogh in this country. When you speak English, I mean, you have the idea to create great art, and even though you will become, you realize you would be in a social outcast, you would be unhappy, and so on. I think that's a worthy So I don't think you're rationally constrained to be a maximizer of well-being for a friend. I think you could be, but I don't think it's irrational. But I don't think you need to be. So my reply to your question would be, yes, I think enjoyment and so on are important for the value of life. But I don't think necessarily all.
Well, that's 40 minutes, so I think you should cut yourself off at this point.
I'd be happy with that.
So thank you, everyone.